Have you been doing the same thing over and over again? Like starting out a comic, and after making the first 10 pages you improve, so you decide to remake the first 10 pages. Again, then again, and again, as if you're never really satisfied with what you made. Insecure, a lack of faith in your craft, improving just a little bit each time, but ultimately never moving forward. Welcome to beginner hell. When I was first making stories, they were more like individual ideas and concepts rather than a complete sequence with a beginning and end. Until, finally, I made this one story I titled Imaginus Vectis Uncanny Warriors, which had a definitive beginning and end. And to my delight, when I was in third year junior high, we had a project where we had to make our own novel, and so I used that idea and was writing every night for the better part of a year and finished it just in time, around early 2015. The result was terrible, cringe, and full of edge, as one could expect from a 15-year-old whose main source of inspiration were flash games, creepypastas, and anime. But I believe this was the beginning of my beginner hell, or starter hell, as subsequently, due to being unsatisfied with my novel, I made another, then another, until I realized I hated writing novels, since at the tail end of it, I was burnt out by the time I turned 17. The first novel was sort of a prototype. It was hard to follow, convoluted, and mostly full of edge. The second one was practically the same, but composed just a bit better. Even today, the prologue of my second rendition sort of holds up, but easily breaks down once you read the following chapters. The third one was sort of the last straw. Once completing it, I began making finally the second novel, but as I said, ultimately, I burnt out. At the same time, my dog at that time died of a tumor. Mitos was her name, an Alaskan Malamute. I dug a pit for her, and at night, with my father, burnt the body. I would never write a novel again. Then I tried doing comics in the style of Ava's Demon, where it would be like a slideshow. I did it digitally at first, and although I had something going on, I would keep self-sabotaging and do it all over and over again to the point I got so stressed, I just cancelled it. But after some time, I decided perhaps doing it traditionally might help. All seemed well at first. I would draw every night after school and assignments. There was a significant consistency built up over time. But after 1 year of penciling, I finished chapter 1, was then again unsatisfied, and began making chapter 1 again from scratch, traditionally. Then went back digitally after the last time, even dipped my toes into webtoons, but deleted it right after. I kept self-sabotaging. I could have just started then and would have finished it a long time ago, but no. I was insane. I had realized there and then I wasn't ready for this. And so, I just stopped doing the story in my first semester of college, ending the madness. A year would pass by, and it wouldn't be until I was in the second year of college, after properly studying traditional drawing, watercolor, and even animating, that I found myself back into comics again. You see, I realized that storytelling through writing and animation were not for me, as both methods are too, let's just say, extreme. Writing was solely words, which was incompatible with my mainly visual process of storytelling, and animation was too repetitive. It took me 5 months just to make a 2-minute animation, and although it was an amazing experience, it was unsustainable. And so, I turned back to comics, but this time, with better awareness and learning from my past mistakes. Instead of making a comic about my grand, hundreds of pages spanning trilogy of a story, Imaginus Vectis, I turned to my dream journal instead, and made a comic about that. I used to jot down my dreams in this journal, Not all of them, but a significant few that I couldn't get out of my head. It had no proper long narrative story to tell, but provided multiple, simple, non-verbal short stories varying from just 2 pages to 10 pages each, at most. Because of this, finishing mostly a bunch of 2-page stories didn't have me looping back in again and again. It was a breath of fresh air. Then I began uploading them to Webtoons, Tapas, and Smacksheaves simply to share them. I could have just stopped there, but the process and fulfillment I got from it made life exciting again. And because I wasn't redoing the same pages over and over again, I knew I was into something. And this was during my second semester of second year college where, things were not so great. Classes would end at 7 p.m. I would be so tired and drained, having to study and wake up early the next day. Making this comic gave me purpose and the will to go on every day. Ironically, studying medical technology drained me of life, but drawing and painting revitalized it. Ultimately, I finished adapting my dream journal into a comic, and at that time it was the highest page count I was able to muster, 78 pages to be exact, almost a full graphic novel by the time I finished second year college. Out of this experience, I learned to take things slow, demonstrate awareness, and avoid being overwhelmed by a goal or project. To not go back and endlessly redraw pages upon pages or canceling a project and self-sabotaging, ultimately putting me in a loop of insanity. The story Imaginus Vectis, or at least what it would become now, would not be published until 2022. But by that time, I was experienced with making comics and then having a better understanding of discipline and consistency. This comic, Dream Journal, would be my first complete and published webcomic, and it would become an important monument in my journey as it heralded my escape from beginner hell. Being stuck in this beginner hell made me realize that this was all just a mindset problem, deeply rooted in insecurity and a lack of faith in my ability to do things, which puts you in a loop where you, for some reason, see your finished work as inferior and have to start from scratch all over again, self-sabotaging, instead of building from what was already made and moving on. We have this tendency to redo what has already been done because we got a little better at our craft, and in certain situations that would be okay. There is nothing wrong with redoing a painting, drawing, frame, or page to improve your piece. The problem arises when we keep doing the same thing over and over again while not moving forward, or in this case, moving on to the next chapter until the story is complete. For me, the most dangerous part of this beginner hell is the inferiority complex that develops during this phase, which self-sabotages your work. I believe during my 1 year away from storytelling and making comics and novels, allowed me to strengthen and condition my mind to move on from my negative self-image and into better opportunities. Don't get stuck in your chapter 1 of life, much like not getting stuck in chapter 1 of your comic. The solutions are rather hidden in plain sight, with the first one being to look long-term. As in the case of my beginner hell with Imaginus Vectis, I was still learning to draw and paint better at that time, and so the worry that my style wouldn't be consistent with my future pages froze me into this loop of doing the same chapter again and again, preventing me from ever completing my story. And that was supposed to be my long-term goal, completing the story. I was so fixated on my first chapter that I was unable to move forward for a long time, until I realized that my life was limited, and that I couldn't keep this toxic activity forever. That being said, a major part of that would include the pursuit of perfection. Know this very well. You will never be perfect at this moment, because your future self, ranging from 10 years from now or just tomorrow, has the potential to be better. And so ultimately, at this present moment, you will never be perfect. And that's alright. And accepting that will allow you to move on, to understand the impermanence of things, and that all things change, for better or for worse. And so that's how making my first ever completed and published webcomic Dream Journal helped me escape my beginner hell. The experience with this part of my journey was both punishing and uplifting. In the end, it is all but a piece of my life where I learned to grow and be a better person. And though I realize now the missed opportunities I had, if I had indulged in them there and then, I wouldn't have had the right amount of discipline and thought to sustain it. Basically, I would have just crashed and burned. While compared today, even though I'm not like, awfully famous or rich because of my comics or my art, at least I'm doing it at a steady pace, always moving and moving forward, which is kind of the important part. With that being said, I hope these experiences helped you on your way, and know that when you pursue something, no one will have the right to judge you for not having tried. As the old saying goes, no sacrifice, no victory.